The beach was ours that day. I remember thinking that as I watched Lyra adjust her white dress against the wind, the fabric dancing around her legs like something out of a movie. We sat on driftwood that had been polished smooth by years of waves, sharing grilled Bangus and San Miguel, the ocean lapping at our feet like it was blessing what we had. The sun was setting behind us, painting everything gold, and she looked at me with those dark eyes that had been haunting my dreams for months. "You know what I love about you, Ronald?" she said, her voice soft as silk, barely audible over the gentle crash of waves. I waited, my heart doing that stupid flutter it always did when she looked at me like that, like I was the most important man in the world. "You're the only foreigner I've ever been close to. I didn't think it would feel this real." Her eyes were wet when she said it. Real tears, not the kind you fake. The kind that come from somewhere deep inside, from a place that's been locked away for years. I reached for her hand, these old calloused fingers from 40 years fixing cars in Detroit, and she squeezed back like I was her lifeline, like she was drowning and I was the only thing keeping her afloat. "I'm not going anywhere," I told her, meaning every word. "I sold everything back home. This is my life now. You're my life now." The words felt heavy coming out of my mouth, weighted with all the loneliness I'd been carrying since Margaret died, all the empty rooms and silent dinners and nights when I'd stare at the ceiling wondering if this was all there was left. She smiled then, that shy smile that made me feel 20 years younger, and whispered, "I prayed for someone like you my whole life. God finally listened." I believed every word. Hell, I believed in us so much that night I called my daughter in Michigan from that beach, waves crashing in the background, and told her I was home. Really home. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like someone actually wanted me around. The way Lyra looked at me when I hung up the phone, like I'd just given her the greatest gift in the world by choosing her, by choosing this life, made me think maybe God had been listening to my prayers too. Why did I stay? That's what everyone asks me now, after everything fell apart. My kids, my old drinking buddies back in Detroit who shake their heads and mutter about guys like me being fools for love. The other expats who gather at the bars in Dumagetti and trade war stories about local girlfriends gone wrong. But you have to understand where I was 2 years ago, the mental state I was in when I first bought that one-way ticket to Manila. Margaret had been gone for 8 months. 8 months of sleeping alone in a bed that still smelled like her perfume, of cooking dinner for one, of sitting in that empty house listening to the clock tick and the neighborhood dogs bark at nothing. Cancer took her piece by piece, until there was nothing left but hospital bills, and a house full of memories I couldn't bear to face anymore. 43 years of marriage, and suddenly I'm this old man wandering through rooms that echo with conversations that will never happen again. My son lives in California, calls maybe twice a year if I'm lucky, usually just to ask about my health or my will. My daughter tries, bless her heart, but she's got her own problems with a husband who drinks too much and kids who don't respect her. The neighborhood I grew up in, it's all boarded windows and drug dealers now. Houses where I used to know every family turned into crack dens and vacant lots. I had 68 years on this earth, and nothing left to show for it except a pension check that barely covered the mortgage and an empty bed that felt bigger every night. So when I saw that Facebook post about retiring in the Philippines, about how your dollar goes further and the weather's always warm and the people treat you like family, I thought, why the hell not? What was keeping me in Detroit? Memories of a dead woman and a neighborhood that died with her? I'd rather be lonely somewhere warm than freeze to death in that empty house, surrounded by ghosts and regret. I didn't come here looking for love, I swear. I came here to disappear, to find some quiet corner of the world where I could drink my coffee in peace and watch the sunrise without thinking about everything I'd lost. But then Lyra started commenting on my posts. Little Bible verses at first, then longer messages asking about my day, my health, my heart. "I'll pray for you," she'd write after every conversation, and somehow I could feel it, like there was this warm presence watching over me from thousands of miles away. When we finally met at that coffee shop in Iloilo City, she wore a simple blue dress that made her look younger than her 36 years, and she carried a worn Bible in her purse, pages marked with highlighter and notes scribbled in the margins. When I kissed her cheek goodbye that first day, she cried. Actually cried. "I've never felt this safe with anyone," she whispered, and I drove back to my apartment that night thinking maybe God hadn't forgotten about me after all. Maybe there was still something good left in store for this old fool from Detroit. The first time she needed money, I didn't even hesitate. Hell, I was almost grateful for the chance to help her. We'd been together 3 months by then. Real together, not just texting and coffee dates and awkward goodnight kisses at her apartment door. She stayed with me on weekends, cooked adobo in my tiny kitchen while I watched her move around my space like she belonged there, read scripture aloud while I watched the evening news, and pretended to listen to both. Her voice had this musical quality when she read from Psalms, like she was singing instead of speaking, and I'd find myself staring at her lips, wondering how I'd gotten so lucky at this stage of my life. Then one evening she got quiet during dinner, pushing rice around her plate without eating, that worried look crossing her face, the one that made her look older than her years, like she was carrying burdens too heavy for someone so small. "What's wrong?" I asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. She shook her head, tried to smile, that bright smile that usually made everything okay. "Nothing, it's okay. I shouldn't bother you with my problems." But I kept pushing, kept asking, because I could see something was eating at her, and I'd learned to recognize that look from 40 years of marriage to a woman who tried to handle everything alone. Finally, she broke down, tears streaming down her cheeks as she told me about her mother. Diabetes medication that cost more than her monthly salary from cleaning houses. Her sister had lost her job at the call center, so there was no help from that direction. The local clinic wouldn't extend any more credit. "We don't know what to do," she whispered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mama might have to go without her medicine this month." 5,000 pesos. About $90 American. I handed her my debit card before she finished explaining, watched the relief flood across her face like sunrise after a long, dark night. "Take whatever she needs," I said, and she kissed my forehead like I was something precious, something holy. "You're God's answer to my prayers," she whispered, and I felt 10 feet tall, like I was finally useful again, like my life had purpose beyond just existing until the next day. A month later, it was school supplies for her son, a sweet kid I'd met exactly twice who called me Tito Ron and shyly asked if I knew how to fix bicycles. Then her aunt's roof collapsed during a typhoon, and suddenly we're talking about 40,000 pesos, almost $800. But the way she thanked me, the way she held me that night like I was her hero instead of just some old guy with a pension, made it feel like the best investment I'd ever made. I started checking my bank account every morning. Not because I was worried about the money, but because I liked seeing the proof that I was taking care of someone again. After 2 years of feeling useless, of being just another burden on my kids, I was needed. I was making a difference in someone's life. I felt like a man again. Everything changed at the Iloilo public market on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. I was buying mangoes for breakfast while Lyra picked out vegetables for the chicken adobo she was planning to cook that evening, one of those domestic moments that made me feel like we were really building something together. The vendor, a gap-toothed old man with skin like leather and eyes that had seen too much, grinned at me and said something in Hiligaynon that made the other customers laugh, this ripple of amusement that I wasn't part of. I smiled politely, the way you do when you're the only foreigner in a crowd and you know they're talking about you but you hope it's friendly. "Sorry, English only," I said, holding up the mangoes I wanted to buy. His grin got wider, more knowing, and he switched to accented English that carried the weight of experience I wasn't prepared for. "Ah, so you're number 9, he said, loud enough for half the market to hear. I laughed, confused, thinking maybe he was talking about the mangoes or some numbering system I didn't understand. "Excuse me?" I said, still smiling because I didn't know what else to do. He nodded toward Lyra, who was suddenly very interested in inspecting tomatoes 20 feet away, her back turned to us like she couldn't hear every word. "You're Lyra's new Kano, right? The American. You're number 9. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocked the wind out of me so completely I almost dropped those damn mangoes. I asked, but the old man just shrugged and started helping another customer, dismissing me like I was nothing special, just another transaction in his long day of selling fruit to tourists and locals who knew better than to ask uncomfortable questions. I stood there holding those mangoes, my hands shaking slightly, while the pieces tried to arrange themselves in my head. Number 9. 9 what? 9 foreigners? 9 boyfriends? 9 fools just like me who thought they were special. The walk back to Lyra felt like a mile, even though she was just across the market. She looked up when I approached, and for just a second, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear, guilt, the look of someone who's been caught but doesn't know how much you know. "Ready to go?" she asked, her voice too bright, too cheerful, like she was trying to cover something up. That night, after we'd eaten dinner in uncomfortable silence, the words hanging between us like smoke, I finally asked her, "Lyra, what did that man at the market mean? About me being number 9? She froze, a forkful of rice halfway to her mouth, and I watched the color drain from her face. Then, the tears started. Real tears, or at least tears that looked real, the kind that had convinced me she was different from the beginning, special, innocent, worth everything I'd given up back home. "Ronald, no," she sobbed, reaching across the table to grab my hands. "People here are jealous. They see a foreigner with a local girl, and they make up stories. They say cruel things to hurt us, to break us apart." Her grip was desperate, fingers digging into my palms like she was trying to anchor herself to my belief in her. "You know me. You know my heart. I never had anyone like you before. Never." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly that I squeezed her hands back and said, "Okay, I trust you." But that night, lying in bed with her curled against my chest, her breathing steady and peaceful while mine came in short, anxious gasps, I stared at the ceiling until dawn, counting the ways I'd been a fool, listing all the little things I'd ignored because I wanted so desperately to be loved again. The second phone appeared a week after the market incident, and I swear I wasn't snooping. I'm not that kind of man. I don't go through purses or read text messages over shoulders or check browser histories. But I was cleaning up after dinner when it slipped out of her purse onto the kitchen floor, this small smartphone I'd never seen before, sleek and new, and definitely not the older model she carried everywhere. When I picked it up to hand it back, she snatched it away so fast she knocked over her water glass, sending liquid across the table and onto the floor. "What's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, trying not to sound like the suspicious old fool I was becoming. "My old work phone," she said, not meeting my eyes, busy mopping up the spilled water with shaking hands. "I keep it for emergencies. Work phone." She cleaned houses part-time for expat families and sold beauty products on Facebook to her friends. What kind of work needed a secret phone? What kind of emergencies required a device she hid from the man who was paying her bills? I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention in a way I hadn't since the early days of our relationship, when everything was new and I was still learning her habits. How she always placed her main phone face down during meals, screen pressed against the table like she was hiding something. How she'd excuse herself to the bathroom with her purse whenever it buzzed at certain times, staying gone for 10 or 15 minutes while I sat there wondering what was so urgent it couldn't wait. How she'd changed her password right after our first night together, claiming she'd forgotten the old one but needing privacy for women's things when I asked to use it to check the weather. "Can I see that picture we took at the waterfall last week?" I asked her one evening. A simple request, natural boyfriend behavior, the kind of thing couples do when they're building memories together. But her hand trembled when she unlocked the phone, and she held it at an angle so I could only see the screen, not navigate anywhere else, like she was protecting state secrets instead of showing me a photo of us smiling by running water. "Beautiful picture," I said, studying her face instead of the image, watching the way she bit her lower lip when she was nervous, the way her eyes darted to the bathroom door like she was calculating her escape route. She was hiding something. The question was whether I was brave enough to find out what, and whether I could survive learning the truth about the woman I'd rebuilt my entire life around. I found the wedding photo by accident, or maybe some part of me was finally ready to see the truth I'd been running from. Lyra was at work, cleaning the Martinez family's house near the university, and I was organizing her bedroom closet as a surprise. Folding clothes properly, getting rid of old boxes, making space for my things since we'd been talking about me moving in permanently. I wanted to surprise her, to show her I was serious about this life we were building together, that I wasn't just some old tourist playing house until I got bored and went back to America. That's when I found the manila envelope stuffed behind her winter coats, the ones she never wore because it never got cold enough in Iloilo but kept anyway, just in case. Old bills mostly. A few birthday cards from relatives, some school reports from her son, and then, at the bottom, a professional wedding photo that stopped my heart cold. Lyra, in a red traditional gown, glowing with the kind of happiness I'd only seen in old movies, holding hands with a Filipino man I'd never seen before, never heard mentioned, never existed in any of the stories she'd told me about her past. The date stamp said 4 years ago, not some teenage mistake or youthful rebellion she'd grown out of. This was recent. This was real. This was the woman I thought I knew, married to someone else while I was still mourning Margaret in that cold house in Detroit. My hands were shaking when she got home from work, humming some pop song under her breath the way she always did when she was happy. I had the photo spread on the kitchen table like evidence at a trial, like proof of a crime I'd been too stupid to see coming. "Who is this?" I asked quietly, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice, trying to give her a chance to explain before I lost my mind completely. She went pale, all the color draining from her face like someone had opened a valve somewhere. Then the tears started. The nuclear option. Full sobbing, shoulders shaking, the kind of broken-hearted crying that made me want to comfort her instead of interrogate her. "Ronald, please," she gasped between sobs. "I should have told you. I was married before, but it was annulled. He hit me. He was terrible to me and my son. I never talk about it because it's too painful." She was breaking down completely now, falling apart right there in my kitchen, and I found myself holding her while she cried, stroking her hair, whispering that it was okay, that I understood, that everyone has a past. Because what kind of monster stays angry at a woman for hiding evidence of abuse? What kind of man puts his own hurt feelings above her trauma? But 2 days later, scrolling through her Facebook photos late at night while she slept peacefully beside me, I found him again. Same man from the wedding photo, same smile, same easy familiarity, tagged in a family barbecue picture from just last month. He was holding her son, laughing at something off camera, and there was nothing violent or threatening about the scene. They looked happy. They looked like a family, a real family. Not like a woman and her abusive ex-husband keeping minimal contact for the child's sake. More like a woman and the father of her child sharing a Sunday afternoon while the foreign boyfriend paid the bills and believed whatever story kept the money flowing. His name was Tobias Muller, and finding him took 3 days of detective work that made me feel like a stalker and a fool at the same time. 64 years old, retired from the Air Force, living in Bacolod City about 4 hours south of where I was slowly losing my mind. I found his Facebook profile after spending sleepless nights going through every photo, every comment, every tagged location in Lyra's social media history, following digital breadcrumbs like some pathetic old man who'd watched too many detective shows. There he was, tagged with her at the same beach, where she'd told me I was her first foreigner, both of them smiling at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. Same restaurant where we'd celebrated our 6-month anniversary, where she'd ordered the same chicken adobo and told me she'd never been happier. Same hotel in Boracay where she'd whispered that she'd never felt love like this before, that I was different from all the other men who'd disappointed her. Except there was Tobias in a photo from 2 years earlier, standing in front of that same hotel with his arm around her waist, both of them wearing matching tourist shirts and that goofy grin people get when they're on vacation and falling in love. I messaged him on a Tuesday afternoon, my hands shaking as I typed what felt like the most important message of my life. Simple introduction. Said I was dating Lyra and wondered if they'd ever met, if he could give me some background, maybe help me understand some things that weren't adding up. I hit send before I could second guess myself, then sat there staring at my laptop screen like it might explode. He responded within an hour. "We need to talk. Can you meet me in Bacolod this weekend?" The drive took 4 hours through mountain roads that twisted like my stomach, past rice fields and small towns where life moved at the pace it had for generations, where people probably didn't lie about loving foreigners just for their pension checks. Longest 4 hours of my life, wondering what I was going to learn, whether I wanted to know the truth or if I should just turn around and go back to my comfortable delusions. We met at a quiet bar overlooking the ocean, the kind of place where expats go to drink away their mistakes and trade stories about the ones that got away. Tobias was tall, gray-haired, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Reminded me of my father, actually, back when Dad still believed the world was a basically decent place where people meant what they said. "How long have you been with her?" he asked after we'd ordered San Miguel and found a table away from the other drinkers. 8 months, I said, surprised by how short it sounded. how little time it had taken for me to uproot my entire life for someone I barely knew. He nodded slowly, like he was doing math in his head. She told you that you were her first foreigner, didn't she? The words hit me like ice water, like someone had just confirmed my worst fears with surgical precision. How did you know? I asked, but I already knew the answer. He pulled out his phone, started scrolling through screenshots he'd apparently been saving for just this moment. Messages, photos, bank transfer receipts, evidence of a relationship that looked exactly like mine. Because she told me the same thing. 2 years ago. Look at this. He showed me a text conversation from 2023, and I felt my world collapse as I read her words. Words I thought she'd written just for me. Expressions of love I thought came from some deep, hidden place in her heart. You're the only man who's ever seen my soul. Tobias. God sent you to save me from loneliness. I've never felt this safe with anyone before. Even the way she asked for money was identical. The sick mother with diabetes. The aunt whose roof collapsed in a typhoon. The school supplies for her son. Word for word, like she was reading from a script, like she'd perfected her performance through repetition with men who were too lonely and desperate to ask the right questions. There were others before me, Tobias said quietly, staring out at the ocean like he was remembering something painful. And there will be others after you. We're just ATMs with emotions to her, Ronald. I'm sorry. I sat there staring at my untouched beer, feeling something die inside my chest. Not my heart, exactly. Something deeper. My faith in my own judgment. My belief that I could still recognize love when it looked me in the eyes and lied so beautifully I wanted to believe every word. The drive back to Iloilo felt like driving to my own funeral. 4 hours of mountain roads and dying daylight while I tried to figure out what to say to her, how to confront someone who'd made lying into an art form. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw the evidence in her face and demand answers. Demand the truth about how many other fools like me were out there funding her comfortable life. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being angry, tired of feeling stupid, just wanted it to be over. I found her in the kitchen making dinner, humming that same pop song, moving around my apartment like she owned it, like she belonged there. For a moment, I just watched her, this woman I thought I knew, trying to reconcile the gentle, faithful girl I'd fallen in love with and the calculating actress who'd been playing me for 8 months. We need to talk, I said quietly, and she turned with that bright smile that had been my undoing from the beginning. The smile faded when she saw my face, saw whatever it was I couldn't hide anymore. What's wrong? She asked, but there was something in her voice, some note of resignation that told me she already knew. Maybe she'd been waiting for this moment, wondering when I'd finally get smart enough to see through her performance. I told her about Tobias. Told her about the screenshots, the identical messages, the same sob stories she'd used on multiple men across multiple years. I watched her face go through a series of expressions, calculations, like she was trying to decide which version of the truth might still work on me. He's lying, she said finally, but her heart wasn't in it. He's jealous because I chose you instead of him. Men like that, when you reject them, they try to destroy your happiness. But I was done being manipulated. Done being the old fool who believed whatever pretty lie she wrapped in Bible verses and tears. Show me your phones, I said, both of them. Show me your messages, your bank accounts, everything. If you're telling the truth, you have nothing to hide. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second she realized the game was over. Saw the mask slip just enough to reveal something cold and calculating underneath, something that had been there all along while I was falling in love with a fantasy. I can't do this anymore, she said quietly, and for the first time since I'd known her, she sounded completely honest. I'm sorry, Ronald. I never meant for it to go this far. She packed her things while I sat at the kitchen table, watching this woman. I'd planned to marry, stuff her life into 2 suitcases, like our 8 months together had been nothing more than a temporary arrangement. She paused at the door, turned back like she was going to say something else, maybe offer one final explanation or apology. But what do you say to someone whose heart you've broken for money? What words exist for that kind of betrayal? She left without saying goodbye, and I sat there in the sudden silence of my empty apartment, wondering how I'd gotten so good at loving people who disappeared. I wrote her one last message 3 days later, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that went cold while I tried to find the right words. How do you sum up 8 months of believing you were special to someone who never saw you as anything more than a number? How do you express the particular kind of hurt that comes from realizing everything you thought was real was just professional-grade manipulation? Lyra, I wrote, then deleted it and started again. Lyra, I know about the others. I know about the wedding photo, the second phone, the same stories you've told to lonely men who were stupid enough to believe they were different. I don't want explanations or apologies or more tears. I'm too old for that kind of theater now. I just want you to know that when I loved you, it was real. When I held your hand on that beach and promised to stay in the Philippines forever, I meant every word. You took that honesty and made me a fool, but I won't hate you for it. I'll pity you instead. Because if you ever did love me, even a little bit, even for a moment in between all the lies, you threw away something genuine for money you'll spend and forget. But I won't forget. I won't forget what it felt like to believe I was chosen, to think that somehow, at 68 years old, I'd found my second chance at happiness. And I won't chase you anymore. I won't be your number 10 or 15 or whatever comes after me. Find some other lonely fool to fund your comfortable life. I'm done. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, before the part of me that still loved her could delete every word and beg her to come back, to lie to me just a little longer, until the loneliness became unbearable again. Then I blocked her number, deleted our photos from my phone, and packed her remaining things in a box that I left with her neighbor. No drama, no confrontation, no begging for another chance to be somebody's ninth choice. I walked outside into the humid morning air and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The constant anxiety of wondering if I was enough, if I was special, if I was loved for something more than my bank balance, finally lifted from my shoulders like a weight I'd forgotten I was carrying. I was alone again, but this time it felt like freedom instead of punishment. 3 months later, I moved to a small town in Negros Oriental, a place where the beach is 5 minutes from everything, and the most exciting thing that happens is the Sunday cockfights behind the municipal building. No expat community to speak of. No bars full of old men trading stories about their local girlfriends and the ones who got away with their hearts and their savings. Just me, a simple apartment near the water, and the kind of quiet I'd been searching for when I first came to the Philippines 2 years ago. I started writing in a journal every morning, sitting on my balcony with coffee and the sunrise, putting words to experiences I'd never expected to have at this stage of my life. Not about Lyra, not about being deceived, but about the parts of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. The man who used to fix engines with his hands, who could look at a broken-down car and see exactly what needed attention. The husband who'd loved one woman for 43 years without needing constant reassurance that he was special. The father who'd raised kids to be independent, even if it meant they didn't need him anymore. I volunteered at a local church soup kitchen, serving meals to families who reminded me that real need exists without manipulation, without scripts, without lies wrapped in Bible verses and delivered with tears. And slowly, something shifted inside me. The anger faded first, replaced by something that felt almost like gratitude. Because Lyra hadn't ruined me, she'd revealed me. Shown me how desperate I'd become for someone else's validation, how willing I was to ignore obvious red flags if it meant not sleeping alone. She'd exposed the pathetic old man I'd become, so focused on being loved that I'd forgotten to ask whether I was worth loving. Maybe I wasn't her first, maybe I was her 9th. Hell, maybe I was her 15th for all I know. But I knew what I'd given her was real. The love, the trust, the hope for a shared future, that was authentic even if her response wasn't. And that still mattered. Not to her, maybe, but to me, to the man I was trying to become in this second half of my life. She didn't break me. She freed me from the illusion that I needed someone else to complete my story. Now, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and orange, fishermen bringing in their nets for the day while children play in the shallows, I don't want to be someone's only foreigner. I don't want to be anyone's first anything. I just want to be whole. Even if that means being alone. Maybe especially if it means being alone. Because the next time someone tells me I'm special, I'll know enough to ask why, and I'll know enough to walk away if the answer doesn't ring true. That's worth more than all the lies I believed, all the money I spent, all the nights I held someone who was counting dollar signs instead of heartbeats. I'm not perfect. I'm not young. I'm not rich by American standards. But I'm real. And maybe, in a world full of people playing roles for money and security and whatever else they're after, that's actually pretty special after all.